Hey everybody, this is Russ Metro Game Core. Last week I went to CES in Las Vegas. That's a trade show that I've been going to now for 4 years, one of the biggest electronics expos that you can find in the world. Now, every year I like to go because it gives me a good idea of what to expect in the following year in terms of just new products coming out and new trends and whatnot. And so today what I want to do is talk about everything that I saw and experienced and how that's going to inform this channel in particular throughout 2026. There was a ton of stuff to see and so many people there. There were nearly 150,000 attendees. I jumped on a plane from Hawaii to Vegas. It's a very simple experience because there are so many flights and people going to Vegas from Hawaii. In fact, they call Las Vegas the 9th island because of it. Before we get started, the most important thing to explain is the handhelds that I brought with me on this trip. So number one, I started with the Miyoo Mini Flip, and that's because I wanted to have something small and pocketable to take around with me. In case I bump into somebody and they say, hey, what is it that you do? I can just pull that out and be like, see how awesome this little handheld is? I have a whole channel talking about this kind of stuff. Beyond just showing it off, it worked great in a pinch because, sometimes we had to jump on a shuttle to go from one hotel to the other. So I always had this thing waiting for me if I wanted to play my favorite retro games. I recently did a video talking about how I limit the number of games that I put on this device so that way I focus on my gameplay. Initially I was using only 5 games on it, but I've now upped it to 10 games, and so now I've got 10 going on. I've mostly been playing Sonic the Hedgehog and Final Fantasy IX. I also brought the AY and Thor with me just because it's such a good travel-friendly handheld because it's a clamshell, and it's also pretty fun to just bust this out and show how awesome it is to people who have never seen one before. Truth be told, I didn't play this one that much just because I had the Miyoo Mini Flip and then the other handheld that I brought with me, which was the one that I actually played the most. The MVP of this trip was the Lenovo Legion Go S SteamOS Edition. I just recently did a video talking about how much I love this handheld PC, and I have not put it down since. Not only was this my main handheld while on the plane back and forth, but also just hanging out in the Airbnb, I often would find myself picking up a game and playing this while hanging out with everyone else. I mostly stuck to 2 different games. I'm still working on the Halo campaign within the Master Chief Collection. I'm getting pretty far. I will probably be finishing it here pretty soon, and I'm hoping that I will get it done before that new update comes out later this year. I also spent a lot of time with Hades 2. I'm now up to about 12 hours of total gameplay, and it's finally starting to click with me. I'm really enjoying this game. I've almost beat the bad guy at the end, and I'm getting really close to it, so I'm looking forward to playing this one even more. Now, while at CES, I probably saw hundreds of different products, and it gets pretty overwhelming to show that off all in one video, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to organize everything into different themes. I think I've got 5 or 6 altogether. The first theme, and kind of the major theme of CES, is that 2026 kind of feels like it's going to be a year of uncertainty. You've probably heard by now, but there is a shortage of RAM, basically because of AI servers and people just scooping them all up. And as a result, consumer RAM and even RAM that's used by manufacturers inside of pre-built PCs and things like that is getting more expensive and scarce. We've known about this for a couple months already, so it's of no surprise that there were not a lot of products announced at CES this year, especially those that relied on RAM and storage because they are in short supply. So things remained relatively quiet in terms of product announcements, but there were a couple things to talk about when it comes to handhelds, probably things that have been in the works for quite some time. A good example is the MSI 8 AI Plus. This one came out last year. I remember finishing my video right before going to CES 2025. And this year they had it at the booth again, but only really to show off 2 new potential color options. That was the only change. They are considering a purple or a lighter blue option. And the product manager was asking everyone, what do you think? Like, what color do you like the best? I voted for blue. I thought this one looked pretty cool. And I think that's what a lot of other people were saying as well. And so I do fully expect to see a blue edition of the Claw 8 AI Plus in the future, but that's a good indication of the sort of things that we saw this year. New color options versus brand new models. Now that being said, there was a new MSI Claw model being shown off there. It's the Claw A8. Now this one actually came out last year, but it didn't launch in North America, so this essentially was just a note to say that yes, you will be seeing this sometime this year. The big change here is this one has an AMD chip inside, the Ryzen Z2 Extreme, same same thing that you find in the Legion Go 2, as well as very similar to the one in the Xbox Ally X. They showed off two different color options. There's the green one and then a white one, but paradoxically, they do not plan on sending the green one to North America at all, so it was kind of there as a teaser. The big change was the overall shell design. It looks a little bit more angular. It feels a bit like the original ROG Ally, and it's also got these very squared off ergonomic bumps on the back, very similar to the original MSI Claw. I'll probably end up doing a review on this one in the coming months, so be on the lookout for that here on this channel. Another major player in the handheld PC space is Asus. They did not have a lot to show when it came to handhelds, and it makes sense, it was just a few months ago when the Xbox Ally devices came out, so they were keeping it kind of quiet in that space. The major thing they were showing off is that they have a new version of their ROG Flow Z13, one of my favorite tablets of last year, and they showed off a new line of products that are in partnership with Kojima Productions, and this is pretty awesome if you are a big fan of Hideo Kojima and like Death Stranding and the Metal Gear Solid games. In terms of specs and internals, it's going to be identical to some models we already saw of the ROG Flow Z13 last year, and I have a review of this here on my channel already. It really does come down to this new external aesthetic design. It even comes with its own briefcase that you can carry it in. It's very much so a limited edition product. They didn't say anything in terms of price, but I'm expecting it to be several thousands of dollars because it also comes with 128 gigs of RAM. And this all kind of goes together with the theme of this section in that 2026 feels a little bit uncertain. We're not seeing a lot of new products, but instead we're seeing new designs and color options and stuff like that. Case in point, Lenovo only had one handheld announcement this year as well, and it was just that the Lenovo Legion Go 2 is going to have a SteamOS variant. So again, same exterior and internals, it's just a new operating system, and that was the extent of their handheld announcements. In keeping with the theme, I also went over to the GPD booth. These guys make some awesome handheld PCs, and they didn't have anything to show off that was new here either. They had the GPD Win 5, which I reviewed on this channel a couple months back, but the only new thing of theirs that I saw was this charging dock for the Win 5, which allows you to charge the battery separately, but then also you've got a bunch of USB ports if you want to dock this up to a computer monitor and basically treat this like a full-on computer. And while I was there, I asked them, I said, hey, what are you going to do for 2026? I've got a lot of 2025 products in front of me. And they said, we're going to wait and see because the RAM and storage prices are just making everything so volatile. And so I think that's a good indication of what we're going to be seeing throughout 2026. The only other brand new handheld that I saw was the One X Fly Apex. Like with the GPD Win 5, this one has the Strix Halo chip inside of it, so a very powerful processor, but also a very expensive handheld. The design is also very similar to the GPD Win 5 with a detachable external battery, but this one does have a bigger screen, 8 inches, 1200p resolution, 120 Hz refresh rate, so those are some pretty good specs. I'll probably be reviewing this one as well, but bear in mind that it's also very expensive. It starts at around $1,800 and goes all the way past $2,000 depending on the configuration that you get. So wrapping up this section, yes, I did see some new handheld options, but a lot of it was more of the same and with a couple tweaks here and there. And this leads me to think that we won't see a lot of new products in 2026, at least in the first half. You never know what's going to happen later on in the year. Now, if you've been following any CES coverage, you may have heard that AI was the big buzzword this year. And it's kind of ironic to me, when I first went 4 years ago, VR was the big buzzword and everyone was talking about how you're going to live inside of a VR space. That never really happened, but man, people were convinced that AI is the future, at least here in 2026. I went to a couple different presentations and keynote speeches, including this one here with MSI, and it was always surprising how often people would bring up the words AI, even if they didn't have a true context to the product that they were talking about in the first place. Probably the biggest offender of using the words AI in everything was Lenovo. Man, they could not keep that word out of their mouths. They ended up doing a huge keynote presentation inside of the Las Vegas Sphere. If you're not already familiar with it, the Sphere is a large spherical auditorium that is in the center of Las Vegas, and a lot of stuff goes on inside of it. They will have concerts and then also some movie screenings and stuff like that. This was my first time inside of it, and it was massive, about 23,000 seats altogether, so it is just huge. As far as I can tell, all the tickets were free. I got invited to it, so I went and I sat in the media section, which was in the nosebleeds, which I thought was pretty funny. And from a technical standpoint, it is a very impressive experience. They had a really high resolution display that covers your entire field of vision, and they've got like those 4D rumble seats, and so it really makes it kind of immersive. And when this thing first kicked off and they were showing off all these fancy graphics, it was really impressive. And I thought to myself, all right, we're in for a treat here. We're supposed to be a 2-hour presentation, and we're just going to see a bunch of movies and stuff. It's going to be awesome. But then all across the screen, it started talking about AI, and I was like, oh, wait, I think I've been tricked into going to an AI conference. Now, a lot of this is my fault. I've never really watched or been to a large tech keynote, and so I didn't really know what to expect. I'd watched a couple Steve Jobs presentations, when he announced the iPhone and the iPad. That was all very exciting, but when you have to sit down and listen to billionaires tell you about AI for 2 hours straight, it gets a little bit boring. And it really was a who's who of everybody within the tech space. NVIDIA and AMD and Intel, all those guys were there, but it also felt quite condescending for them to tell us about how AI was going to solve everything while I'm watching all the products I actually want to buy skyrocket in price because of RAM shortages. So putting this all together, it kind of felt like there was just a series of billionaires standing in line to tell us how to use our computers, and it just felt a little bit condescending and disingenuous in general. Now, again, I've never really been to any of these keynotes. They might all be like that, but it was just a very strange experience how much they said AI and talked about how it's going to make our lives better, but I never really saw anyone's lives getting better throughout the process. One more example before I get off my AI soapbox is that they had FIFA there. The CEO was there talking about how they're partnering with Lenovo to basically digitalize the entire soccer experience. They're going to make these digital avatars of every player, all these special cameras and all this other stuff to essentially just create these better strategies and tactics and whatnot within the field and be able to optimize the entire experience. And for me, this also felt very weird. The way I look at it, in this evolving technical world, there are very few things that feel very analog and human, and one of those are sporting events. When it comes down to it, humans have been playing sports and watching sports for thousands of years, and the idea of digitalizing soccer, which is the largest sport in the world, felt like it was pulling all of the humanity out of it. Now, obviously, this is not going to happen with every single sports match going forward, but the fact that they were celebrating it on a stage in this auditorium that probably cost millions of dollars to rent just felt really weird. And then to cap it all off, they had Gwen Stefani come out and sing a bunch of old school songs from the 90s. And this was just so strange as well. Like, why did they pick Gwen Stefani of all people to come out here and play a bunch of music? And it was so funny. Like, there were, the whole place was packed. So, 23,000 people or so. And then by the end of like the first few songs, half the place had cleared out, probably because most of them were like businessmen who did not want to sit around and listen to a bunch of ska punk music. Another funny part is that Gwen didn't really seem to jive with the audience, which makes sense. I mean, most of the time when she's performing in front of a group of people, they probably paid money to see her play, so they know all the songs and whatnot. And so she kept saying stuff like, stand up and dance. Come on, what's wrong with you guys? And it was like, you're talking to a room of introverts. Like, these people probably don't dance that often in the first place, and they may not be familiar with your songs. And so I just found it to be just a really funny and strange experience where they were talking about, AI for 2 hours straight, and I didn't really see any practical use throughout the entire thing. And then there was a rock concert at the end that just didn't really land as well as I thought it would. At the same time, that's kind of the beauty and fun of CES, is that people are trying out new things, and it's kind of exciting. And many times it doesn't stick, it doesn't land, but at the same time, it's cool that people are trying out new things and that we're there to witness it in the first place. And sometimes they nail it. For example, I went to a Lenovo AMD party, and they had people up from Lenovo and AMD as well as Blizzard, basically talking about portable gaming in the first place, and mostly talking about handhelds and how they are pushing towards efficiency and power at the same time, and how they're looking forward to the future chipsets and the ones that we already have. And it's always exciting to hear stuff like this. These bigger companies are definitely trying to make a better gaming experience for everybody when it comes to the handheld space. So this was all really great. But then at the same party, they also had a bunch of signature cocktails, and one of them just cracked me up. It was called Lenovo Legion Go Juice, and it was just vodka Red Bull, but it was so funny that they put that name on that specific drink. I'm assuming because they assume gamers are going to be drinking energy drinks, so that's going to be their drink of choice. Either way, these are the kind of things that are really subtle and funny that you will often find at CES. One more example of how AI is kind of sneaking into marketing with everything was this one company called Glide. I had heard about them, I thought it was hilarious, so I went to go and check them out. They essentially had made a smart hair clipper. The way this works is you put on these special glasses, which maps the topography of your head, and then you use that to basically map out whatever fade you want from the clipper. And so the clipper knows when to adjust itself to give you the perfect haircut. And of course, they promoted the fact that it has a built-in AI coach. I still have no idea what that means, but they were able to throw the word AI into these very funny hair clippers. One funny story about this is that they were offering free haircuts for everybody who signed up, and I didn't sign up, I didn't need a haircut, but Zoo over at Retro Handhelds, he signed up, and he watched the guy in front of him get a haircut, and he immediately noped out as he was waiting in line. He was like, I'm not going through that. And so he ran away. He didn't even tell them that he canceled the appointment. So I thought that was hilarious and very awkward. But I would say, in general, these are the kind of things that we will see at CES. This new technology, new ideas, it's all really fun. Often it's better to wait for like version 2 or version 3 of some of this stuff. But also they were integrating the words AI into everything, sometimes without any actual practical use. And so that was probably the biggest theme that I saw in CES. AI was everywhere. Thankfully, there were still a lot of awesome things to see at the show, and I think the best thing overall was just the sheer amount of different controllers and ideas that I saw within this particular space. One of the most exciting things I saw was the X5 Alteron from GameSir. This is a swappable telescopic controller. They're making this in partnership with Hyperkin, and it has a very much so retro focus. They've got all these different modules that you can swap in and out, and you can flip them however you would like. D-pad up top, D-pad down bottom, you can do anything you want. They've also got specific button layouts to emulate different controllers. You want a 6-button controller, you want GameCube, Nintendo 64, they've got all that stuff set up. They're planning on releasing it this year, but it's still very much a work in progress. All this stuff that we were looking at was prototypes, but still a very exciting concept. I do have some concerns on the software side. How is this going to work in terms of, plopping in the Nintendo 64 buttons? Are they going to get mapped automatically in each of the apps, or are you going to have to remap everything every single time you use a new module? Either way, I love the fact that we're getting a telescopic controller that's going to be focused on retro gaming, and the heights and widths of everything should work out pretty well. You can use it with small tablets, you can even use it vertically for certain shoot 'em up games. It's going to be a pretty cool experience, and I will definitely review this once it comes out. Another controller the GameSir was showing off is what they're calling the Pocket Taco. This one should be coming out here pretty soon. So essentially this will clamp on the bottom of your phone. It's a Bluetooth controller, and then you can connect to your emulators and then play it vertically on the go. The buttons themselves are modeled after the Game Boy DMG, and they feel great. So I think this will be a pretty fun controller if you just want something really quick for gaming on the go. I know that 8BitDo is also working on something very similar, but I didn't get a chance to see it at the CES. There was a lot going on, so maybe we'll have to do a head-to-head comparison sometime in the future. One other GameSir controller that really kind of took me by surprise is this one that they're calling the Swift Drive. So this one looks like a PlayStation controller. It's modeled after their Tarantula line, but it has this huge, heavy wheel right in the center of it. And the idea here is that this will work as a steering wheel for driving games. I actually was able to test it out. I don't have any footage of that, but man, it felt really good. As far as using a racing game with a controller, this was by far the best experience I had ever had. There was force feedback. There were moments when the controller was harder to use than not, depending on what was going on in the game. And so this is going to be a lot of fun if you want to have something that's kind of like a racing wheel, but not quite there. It reminded me a lot of that old PlayStation controller made by Namco that they used to use for Ridge Racer, where you would twist it in order to play, where it's kind of a halfway point between a regular controller and an actual steering wheel. And so I'm really looking forward to this. I will probably do a video about this one as well. Now, if you're into steering wheels, then they are also making one themselves. It's called the Turbo Drive, and I don't really know a lot about these things, but it was pretty cool that it had a fan attached to the top of it that would blow air on you depending on how fast you were driving, so it kind of felt like you were actually driving. Now moving on, 8BitDo was there as well. It's the first time I've seen them at CES, so they had their whole booth, they had all their controllers. It was kind of a crazy reminder of just how many products this company has made. I've been using their stuff for about 10 years at this point, and so it's pretty cool to see all the different models as well as the different colors and configurations that they've made since then. The most exciting thing for me was this new 8BitDo Ultimate 3E. This is a wireless Xbox controller, but I think it's the start of their Ultimate 3 line. There's a couple neat features to this one. It's got a wider grip angle. It feels more like holding an actual Xbox controller. I think it's going to be more comfortable to use over longer play sessions. They've also got detachable faceplates, which allow you to swap out out button modules. So you can either have rubber membranes like a classic 8BitDo or Nintendo feeling button, or you can also use micro switches instead if you want that more clicky PC gaming experience, all in the same controller. The controller is going to come with its own carrying case, which will have all these different options, including different thumbstick caps and everything. You can also swap out the D-pad between a cross style and a shield style, so that's going to be awesome as well. You can really tailor the overall feel of your controller, which I think is awesome. They made a couple other small changes. For example, there's now ventilation in the dock, which I was surprised to see because my dock never really gets all that warm, but they said that this was to help with heat dissipation. Other than that, it looks and feels a lot like the 8BitDo Ultimate 2, and I am hoping to see this in a lot of other controllers in the future. I actually asked them a couple times, I was like, okay, is this the start of the Ultimate 3 line? Are we going to see a PC controller and a Switch controller with the same design? And they were like, we're not allowed to comment on that, which to me says yes. I don't think they've got a final price just yet, but they said it's going to be around $150, and it's going to be expensive because of that Xbox wireless license, like we've seen with other controllers that are similar to this one. And then finally, I also wanted to talk a bit about MCon, which is a company that showed off their controller at CES last year, and it's finally shipping this year. And they were showing off a couple of accessories right now. They've got a dock, so you can plug this in directly into your TV, and then they've also got something called KeyCast, which is an HDMI adapter that you can put on a keychain. Beyond that, they were showing off some prototypes of their upcoming controllers. Now, these are not going to get released for like another year or so it's going to be quite some time. So these were just really prototypes to show what they're planning on working on in the coming year. They're looking at two different options, one called the Light and one called the Slim. Now, the Light is about 10 millimeters in thickness, so quite thin, but then the Slim is half that, so only 5 millimeters. And these two controllers feel a lot like the original vision that this creator had when he first came up with the concept of the MCon controller. The way he described it is that the one that they have out right now is what he would call the MCon Pro, and then these ones are going to be more like the regular MCon and then a slimmer version as well. Because it's a prototype, they're looking through all these different options, like a special faceplate that will go directly onto your phone and make it a lot thinner, and the buttons and the sticks themselves are still very much so a work in progress. So I didn't spend a ton of time testing it out, but really just kind of getting a feel for the overall concept. The feedback I had for the company was that it feels a little bit weird that they're working on two different models at once that are so similar to one another. Instead, I would love just to see one really small, thin controller that does it all, and then you'd have a thick one and a thin one instead of three different products, which I think kind of muddies the water all around. But like I said, there's probably going to be a year or so before this one actually comes out, so there will probably be a lot of refinements before then. So keep an eye out for this. I will probably do a video once they have these other models as well. Okay, for my next segment of this video, I want to talk about mini PCs, because even though everything is getting really scary in terms of RAM prices and storage and whatnot, it is pretty cool to look at all the innovations that have been happening within the mini PC space too. I've probably reviewed about 50 different mini PCs on this channel over the years. I love the idea of having something small and compact to use for emulation as well as light PC gaming, and so this has always been a topic that's near and dear to my heart. We've got two exciting models from Asus that I will probably cover at some point on this channel. The first is called the ROG GR70, so this is very similar to the ROG Nook that came out last year. This one has an AMD processor as well as an RTX 5070 laptop GPU inside. And so I'm looking at this one as being a somewhat lightweight console-sized mini PC, kind of similar to a Steam machine if you really think about it. Now on the more traditional side, they are also coming out with a new Nook that looks just like a small form factor mini PC, but this one is running the new Intel Panther Lake series. I haven't had a chance to test this particular CPU, and so I did tell them to send this one over to me for review because I think it will be pretty neat to see how this works from an emulation standpoint. Another smaller PC that caught my eye is the G1 Pro from Minis Forum. I've reviewed a lot of their stuff on this channel before. This one has a powerful AMD CPU inside, but then also a low-profile NVIDIA RTX 5060. I'm going to see if I can get my hands on this one too, because I'm hoping it'll be a pretty nice gaming setup as well. I also took the time to look at some smaller mini PC manufacturers. One is called Geekom. I've never really covered them on this channel, but I've seen them on sale on Amazon all the time. They've got a wide range of mini PCs in terms of size and power, all the way up to the AI Max 395, which is that Strix Halo chipset, so super powerful mini PC, and I like that it looks really clean. But they've also got a lot of mid-tier and lower priced ones as well, and so I'm hoping to get my hands on one of these too, probably one of the lower spec ones, to see how it works as an emulation box. Overall, I was really impressed with the clean aesthetics of some of these mini PCs, so let me know which one in particular you would like me to test out. One other company that I visited is called Ace Magic. Again, not one that I've worked with before, but I've seen them on Amazon. They've also got a similar layout of mini PCs all the way up to the Strix Halo. Theirs is called the Tank. It looks like a big cube. It's kind of cool, but also very gamery looking, which is not something I usually like. But they do have two that have very interesting shells, one that looks like a PS1 and another one that looks like an NES. Now, these have some pretty powerful chips in them. They're going to have the AMD Ryzen HX 470 chips, which are essentially just a reskin of the 370s, so still a very powerful processor, about as powerful as the Lenovo Legion Go 2 and the Xbox Ally X. And it is kind of weird that they made these computers that look like a PS1 and an NES, but are going to be able to play things like Cyberpunk. Like, I kind of wish that they put a lower powered processor in them because I think it would fit the aesthetics a little bit more. I'd love to have a little PC that looks like a PlayStation that can play, PS1 and PS2 games on the cheap. And so that was the advice that I gave them, was make a lower spec model. I think people would love that. And then finally, the last topic I wanted to talk about were all the accessories that I saw at CES. And in many times, these accessories were more interesting and fun to look at than the computers themselves. Let's start with the Asus ROG X-Real R1 glasses. So these are essentially X-Real glasses that are made in partnership with Asus with a focus on gaming. These are going to work a lot like the other AR glasses we've seen over the years, but they have a 240 Hz refresh rate and some RGB lighting on the side of them. They were also showing a dock that you could connect them to, for example, if you wanted to have HDMI in and then going into your glasses, but this seemed a little bit weird since it's so stationary, so you'd have to sit at your desk wearing these glasses, which to me was a little bit odd. But I am excited to try out these glasses. It's been a couple years since I reviewed one of these, and so we'll see. Maybe I'll review this one as well and tell you what it's all about. Another accessory I always love to test out are eGPUs, and there are quite a few different options. Gigabyte is working on a couple of their own, a low-spec model and a high-spec model. These are all going to be Thunderbolt connections, and so this might be pretty interesting to see in general if you have a laptop or a handheld and you want to boost the performance while plugging it into a monitor. Minis Forum also had a new eGPU docking station at their booth. This one originally only had Oculink as its only connection, but now it also has Thunderbolt, so this is going to improve the variety of different systems that you can use it with. This one's a little bit more DIY because you have to bring your own graphics card and power supply to it, but in general, I like the amount of versatility that this one offers. One thing that I thought was an eGPU but was not is this thing called the Frost Bay from 1X Player. This is a liquid cooling box that you can connect to certain devices of theirs. They were showing it off with their new tablet PC, which is also a Strix Halo, much like the ROG Flow Z13. And essentially, yeah, you're going to put water into the reservoir, and then that's going to pump liquid cooling into the tablet itself and allow you to max out the TDP. They showed it off in a demo for me, and without the cooling, the tablet will run at about 65 watts max TDP, but if you plug in the liquid cooling apparatus, it's going to go all the way up to 120 watts. Now, I think the overall design is a little bit clunky and very much so feels like a first generation product, but it's kind of cool that they even tried this in the first place. I believe it's also going to work with their Apex handheld as well, but I didn't actually see that one in action. Speaking of cooling, one other really neat thing that I saw was from a company called Ventiva. So they're working on a fanless cooling system that helps to reduce overall fan noise while still keeping things very cool. They're using a special ionic technology, and they were showing it off and using it in other first-party products. So for example, they had a Legion Go 2, they pulled it apart, took out the fan, and put their own inside. And the way they explained it to me is that this was able to give you the same level of performance as the high performance mode on the Legion Go 2, but the same amount of fan noise as it is on the silent mode. So you get all the great performance, but none of that extra noise. They're already working in partnership with AMD to launch a line of laptops that are going to use this particular cooling, so potentially this might be something that we see in the future. They did mention also that the power draw on this is very similar to what a fan would be in the first place. It's a little bit higher, but only a fraction of that. And so this is the kind of stuff I love to see at CES, where somebody is trying out a new idea and it helps to improve the product for everybody. So who knows, maybe a couple years from now, we're going to see handhelds that have this type of cooling in them instead of the traditional fan. I also found the JSOX booth. I'm not sure if they've been at CES before, but it's the first time that I've seen them. They had a couple new products. One was a new Switch charging dock. This thing is kind of an all-in-one. You can charge 4 different Switch 2 Joy-Cons at once, and then also a Pro controller here on the back. In addition, it's got a modular docking station too, so you can plug this in, then plug the Switch 2 in it directly, and then also use this as your dock to play it on the TV at the same time. They also showed off some prototypes for Steam Machine faceplates. It's the first time that I've ever seen an in-person prototype of the Steam Machine itself, and I was surprised at the overall size of this thing. It's pretty small, it's just like a little 6-inch cube. It'll be interesting to see how all of these faceplates come out. For now, they just had a couple different designs to show off. Another booth that I spent a lot of time at was Genki's. They've got a lot of Switch 2 accessories coming in the future, including an entire grip accessory ecosystem. They already did a couple grip cases previously, like the Attack Vector, but these feel more like a Generation 2 product, and they are very comfortable. All in all, they showed off about 8 different grip types and different sizes and different hand feels, and you can buy these in a package, and I'm really impressed with how some of these feel. One of them felt like a D-brand kill switch, which is like one of my favorite grip feels altogether, but they also had this one called Dragonback, which initially looked kind of crazy, like it looked really rigid and just kind of strange, but once you put your hands in it, I was like, holy smokes, this has got to be the most comfortable thing that I've ever felt on a Switch 2. They showed off how they went through the entire manufacturing process, starting with a piece of clay, and then 3D imaging that, and then printing it out, and then kind of making multiple iterations until they got the hand feel they were going for. And so overall, I like the overall amount of care and attention to detail that they are working on with this Generation 2 product. It seems like these guys are always working on new ideas. For example, they had a 3D printed arcade setup right there where you could plug in a Steam Deck and then play your arcade games directly on this little machine. They also showed off the next generation of some of their other previous products, like the Shadowcast 3. So this one is a screen capture device that actually works with a Nintendo Switch. So you can plug this in and then use it, like for example, playing Switch games on an iPad, which is kind of crazy. They also have the 3rd generation Covert dock. This is a USB plug that also works with the HDMI out. So you can use this connected to something like a Switch and then plug that into a TV as opposed to walking around with a dock. I also made my way over to the Hyperkin booth, and one thing in particular that caught my eye is this new Fender controller that they're working on. They're calling this thing the Infinicore, and it's an officially licensed Fender guitar that's modeled after the Telecaster. There are a couple things that make this one unique. Number one, it's fully modular. You can pull out all the different parts, the head and the different parts of the stock. It really is just the center part that is the controller itself. So if you want something that looks more like a Fender Stratocaster, or maybe they'll have like a Les Paul edition, like you can put all those together while still keeping the innards of the guitar itself. It's also going to have Guitar Hero buttons at the top, but then Rock Band buttons at the base of it for when you're doing solos, but then it also has a finger tapping option in the center. I didn't get any good footage of that, but if you can imagine, you'll basically play it like this, if you've ever seen someone finger tapping on a guitar, as opposed to strumming it near the bass. And so, I don't know, that might be a pretty cool option altogether. The controller is supposed to be coming out later this year, and I believe it's going to be launching in conjunction with a new game called Sound System. This one is still a work in progress, but it's made with veteran developers of Rock Band and Guitar Hero, and it's pretty exciting that we're going to be seeing a new rhythm game coming in the future. For now, it's only going to be guitar and vocals, but they did talk about potentially adding new instruments later on as well. I'm pretty excited about this one. I've been playing a lot of Clone Hero lately, and so I like the idea of having a new option to play as well. So there you go, that's my recap of CES 2026. There were some highs, there were some lows, and a lot of fun in between. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. What products were the most interesting? What are the things you'd like me to cover? I'm a one-man show here at Retro Game Core. It takes me forever to review a device, so let me know the things you would like to see. It helps me a lot. As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. We will see you next time. Happy gaming.